growing up the way we did, when you were about 8, 9 years of age, you were sent to my grandfather's house, and which is still in the family today. And you went and you were mentored down to the most basic thing. Here's how you hold a brush. Here's how you scrape, and here's how, down into the details. And he was preparing you. And he was interesting. You'd work and you'd clean the brushes and you'd do the whole thing. And so the whole principle was this: you were being trained to fulfill the mission of what the family's business was can you put your name to the work? Can you put your name to that? So when you're
That's such a good life lesson.
So when you got to be about 10 or 11, you got to go to work on the jobs. And at the end of the day, grandfather come along and he'd inspect it. And he said, well, can you put your name to it? And then it got to the point that it became this filter system. Can you put your name to it?
Mm-hmm.
And what they understood is that if we worked in such a way that we held ourselves to a standard, that not only could we be proud of the work we did, but that's where the new business was coming from. Work in such a way that people will refer you. Mm-hmm. Can you put your name to that? Well, that was the core that everyone in my family has been built into us. And then it shows up in every detail that you do.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Excellence Project. My name is Eric Worre, and today I have a treat. His name is Brian Buffini. He is like a real estate training guru. He has trained millions of people around the world on how to have a more successful business. He's learned how to work by referral, teach people how to work by referral, which I think you'll find interesting, how to stay in contact with people that he builds relationships with and deepen those relationships, and how that's really a cheat code in order to be able to have a more successful business, whether it's network marketing or anything else. So I think it's a life skill as much as it is a business skill. And I think you should pay attention to it. So we talk about everything. We talk about failures and falling on our face and personal development and some of our heroes. We have some common heroes in our personal development journey. I enjoyed it. I think you'll enjoy it too. And a whole bunch of tips and tricks in here. If I was you, maybe listen once when your hands are busy and your mind's free, and maybe listen again and take some notes. See if you can capture some things out of this. So with no further ado, let's jump right into my conversation with Brian Buffini. Brian Buffini, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Eric.
I'm glad you're here. So you were in town doing an event at our studio.
Yes, sir.
And I hear that went well.
Fantastic. What a place. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much.
It was a privilege.
It's super fun to be able to, it's a nice spaceship we have over there to be able to do interactive events.
Yeah, no, I looked at the studio, and again, the fellas who kind of invent the technology were presenting it to me.
Yeah.
And I said, well, before I go spend a boatload of money, who's doing it well?
Right.
And then I said, who's doing it best? And they said, well, you got to go see Eric Worre. And I said, okay. And we went out there, and I went there and I toured it, and we had the tour, and I came back and they said, well, are you interested in buying? I said, absolutely not. I'm interested in hopping to Vegas on a regular basis. So we had an event yesterday. It was brilliant, and your team was a credit to you.
Yeah, thank you.
And we've done 2,500 seminars, and I don't know if I enjoyed anyone more than
that's
I did
great.
Yesterday.
Super great. Well, I'm glad you were. The only reason we built it is because we had a friend who had one, not quite to the level of this.
Right.
And we needed to do an event. We're like, hey, can we rent it? He said, sorry, I'm not renting it to anybody right now. Everybody's asking, but I'm not, hope it's okay. And we're like, okay, I guess we got to build one. So, same type of deal. It's like, if we would have had it to rent, we would have taken the rental opportunity as well.
Great. Well, thanks for letting the Irish immigrants in to rent.
Yes, I was just to talk about that. Yeah. So you grew up in Ireland.
Yeah.
Son of a house painter, third generation entrepreneur.
Right.
What was the upbringing like?
Yeah. So, the beautiful thing when you're growing up, Ireland was a very poor country for a very long time, up until basically the end of the 1990s. So we were considered a third world country, but you didn't know it. We didn't know we didn't have anything. So 5 boys and a girl, and our grandparents on the weekends. So 710 square feet. Small little house. Dad's a house painter. His father, 5 generations of house painters. And so, the good news was we didn't have any heat in the house, but you never got a cold seat in the bathroom. That's what we used to say, because someone had been there just before, right? In one bathroom, 5 boys in one bedroom, very close family. And great principles. So we were house painters, entrepreneurs. We were the only people with a phone on our street.
Wow.
So the neighbors would come and use the phone, and so because you're an entrepreneur, like you needed a studio, my dad needed a phone. So great opportunity, Irish humor, education, good place to start, makes you hungry, and just there was no opportunity. So I came to America in 1986. I was a soccer player, came over here.
Really?
Won a national championship, playing soccer.
What was your position?
I was what's called a sweeper. So I played behind, I'd like to be the free safety in football.
Okay,
so I played number 5. I played behind the defense and offside trap and all that. Won a national championship in 84.
Like university?
Yeah.
Okay.
Outlands College. And then came over to America.
What year?
It was 84. Yeah.
Okay. So I got to tell you my one, I only have one interesting Ireland story.
Okay.
So I'm there for business. I'm in Dublin.
Okay.
And this is 1994.
Okay.
And I realized that the World Cup's happening because everything's shut down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm in my room watching on the TV. I'm like, this is stupid. I need to find a pub or something.
For sure.
So Ireland was playing
Italy.
Germany.
Oh, okay. In the second round. Yeah.
Germany.
Yeah.
And they beat him with this big wheel kick.
Yeah.
At the end of this. And the country went bananas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Everything was shut down. Nobody
Right.
was doing anything. Nothing was moving. And they adopted me into this pub in Dublin, and they're all singing songs and they're doing this stuff. And the guy who owned the place, like, had to lock the doors at like 2 a.m. or something. So he gave the keys to the people inside the pub.
It's called a lock-in.
They locked them in. They
Yep.
locked us all in.
Yep.
And everybody was singing songs all night.
Yep.
Everybody's leaving the money for the guy. I'm like, well, this doesn't happen in the United States. So we spill out at like 7 a.m. And then I went to go do my events that I was doing there that day.
A little woolly.
But man, it was the first time I really understood the importance of football over there.
Oh yeah.
To the culture.
Yeah.
Like, this wasn't just beating Germany.
No.
This is old.
Yeah.
This has old, like, resentments built in.
Oh
this has,
yeah. Well,
this has all
kinds of
kinds of stuff.
Well, they say the difference between an Irishman with Alzheimer's and an American with Alzheimer's is that the Irishman will forget everything but the grudges.
Yeah. Yes.
So, by the way, if as funny as it sounds, because you're motivating and encouraging people to change their lives and so on and so forth. And I said Ireland was a very poor country. Like, if you watch the movie The Commitments, that's the Ireland I grew up in.
Really?
That
was a good movie.
That World Cup that was in the US was the start of what became known as the Celtic Tiger. So Ireland, which is very difficult on its own inhabitants with taxes, put these fabulous pro-growth taxes for companies to come to Ireland. They had a great education system, English-speaking people, closest country to America in Europe. So the tinder was all there. When Ireland went that far in the World Cup, it changed the psyche of the whole country. You were there that's like a crossroads watershed moment for the country's history.
Really?
And so what you witnessed there wasn't just the massive exuberance of soccer and whatever else. So they point to this Celtic Tiger. For the next 12 years, Ireland was the fastest growing country in the world. China and Ireland. And that's why Ireland today, if you go to, I don't know when was the last time you were there.
Oh, it was 7 or 8 years ago.
You'd be shattered.
Really?
If you walk down the quays, it used to be, I used to run for my life as a kid to not get mugged, running down the quays of Dublin to get home. And today it is Silicon Valley of Europe. It is high tech, the hottest looking stuff you ever saw. Microsoft, Salesforce, Facebook,
I love
Google. Apple has 25% of their available cash in Ireland.
Yeah.
So it's now the Silicon Valley of Europe, amongst the most expensive place. So we went from tremendously poor, agrarian culture, backwards, like considered like below the African countries economically. Our greatest export was people for 150 years. So ambitious people left. And then all of a sudden, bang. And that you were there the day that Tinder was lit. That's how significant. There's
the
books
first
written about
round.
You were there.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, it's when I started following.
Yeah.
I started doing it. Do you have a team that you follow?
Yeah. I mean,
who's your team?
Liverpool's
You're in Liverpool?
my team. Yeah. big time.
Yeah, it's like Liverpool, Manchester United.
Yeah,
or,
right.
Yeah, that they hate each other.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Well, they call Liverpool the capital of Ireland. There's more Irishmen in Liverpool, I think, than there is in Dublin.
So,
how about you?
I don't have a team. I watch the big games.
Yeah.
The United States is starting to wake up a little bit.
Yeah.
I went to an LA Galaxy game a little while ago.
Yeah, they're great.
And pretty decent environment.
For sure. I went to see Messi up there at the LAFC.
Not a bad environment compared to, you were at the Messi game?
I was.
I was at the Messi game.
Brought the family right down on.
Oh my gosh. I was right there.
Yeah. If you get a chance to go to Anfield.
And they totally gave him a break to score the game, win the game. Like, come on. The Galaxy had him that game, but Messi came in. He's amazing.
If you get to go to Anfield, it's like a cathedral.
Yeah.
It is the music and the singing. You'll never walk alone. They never sit down. It is. I used to go once a month as a kid. I'd work. I've worked my whole life. Worked since I was 8 years old, and I would save and I would go over once a month with one of my dad's friends, and he'd take me over with a couple of kids, and you go to Anfield, and I'm just saying you would have goosebumps all over your body being there, experiencing that. Nothing like it.
See, that's what I always wanted. So I went and saw the Euro Cup when Barcelona won against Manchester United.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
And that was okay, but what I found out about like Euro Cup, it's not the same as the regional. No. Like the local.
Yeah.
I went and saw in Donetsk before it got destroyed. I went and saw Euro Cup there.
Oh yeah.
Quarterfinals.
Right.
And that was cool, but it wasn't the same. I went to Juventus. And that was like, okay.
Yeah, man.
This is different.
A little bit of juice.
There was a guy who looked like Bane from Batman with his shirt off. He would stand up behind the goal and get everybody. He never even looked at the field.
Yeah.
He just would stand up on the railing and then he'd lead all the songs and all the chants and the flags. I was like, okay, that's pretty close.
Yeah.
I did a training once in Europe, and I was trying to teach people that if they had the proper motivations, they can accomplish anything.
Yeah.
And so I get this guy to stand up. I said, okay, I will help you. He said, wanted to achieve this goal. And he'd been trying for 3 years. I will help you, but you have to be willing to accept accountability. Will you accept it? I was in front of 30,000 people.
Wow.
And he said, okay. I said, is there a team that you love? He said, yes. What is it? Manchester United. Okay. Is there a team that you hate? He said, yes. Faster. What is the team? He said, Liverpool.
Of course.
I said, okay, here's the deal. How long do you think, give yourself plenty of time. How long do you think you need in order to be able to do this, achieve this goal? And it was like 4 months. Okay, fine. We have an event 5 months from now. If you don't achieve it, you need to wear a Liverpool jersey for a month.
Nice.
Your cover page on social needs to say, I love Liverpool. You need your profile picture needs to be Liverpool.
Yeah.
He said, and he turned white. He said, you don't understand.
If you'd have taken one of his kids hostage,
my
it would have been
family
easier.
will not talk to me if this is true. I said, well, tell them that they'll help you get your goal done.
Yeah.
Because this will be a shame to the family. And he accomplished it in like 3 weeks.
Yeah, right.
Done.
That's a meaningful goal.
Took him a while.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Well done.
So anyway, for the sidetrack about all the local stuff.
Yeah.
You had a little bit of a blueprint of entrepreneurship dropped into your psyche as a kid.
Right.
That we look at things different. We're not necessarily a member of the union. We're not necessarily, we're not going on strike because we're here to build a business.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That had to be different.
Well, growing up the way we did, when you were about 8, 9 years of age, you were sent to my grandfather's house, and which is still in the family today. And you went and you were mentored, like a kind of a Mr. Miyagi, long before Mr. Miyagi type mentorship. And down to the most basic thing. Here's how you hold a brush. Here's how you scrape. And here's how, down into the details. And he was preparing you. And he it was interesting. You'd work and you'd clean the brushes and you'd do the whole thing. And they had a number of guys working at the time. So you're cleaning the ladders and painting ladders. We had wooden ladders as well. And so the whole principle was this: You were being trained to fulfill the mission of what the family's business was can you put your name to the work? Can you put your name to that? So when you're
That's such a good life lesson.
So when you got to be about 10 or 11, you got to go to work on the jobs. And you might be if we were in a commercial building, they'd let you paint the radiators, right? So the radiators, as they'd say at home. And you'd sand it and whatever else, and you'd paint this thing. And they're actually hard to paint.
Sure. And
at the end of the day, grandfather come along and he'd inspect it. And he'd say, well, can you put your name to it? And then it got to the point that it became this filter system. Can you put your name to it? And what they understood is that if we worked in such a way that we held ourselves to a standard, that not only could we be proud of the work we did, but that's where the new business was coming from. Work in such a way that people will refer you. Can you put your name to that? Well, that was the core that everyone in my family has been built into us. And then it shows up in every detail that you do. And so when I came to America, and I got in a motorcycle accident. So I'm here, I'm 19 years of age, and I'm planning to go back to Ireland. And I came to America to meet suntanned women and become suntanned. And I married an African-American girl 35 years ago, and I'm still kind of pasty. So, life doesn't turn out the way
doesn't
you
quite,
want. Yeah. But I got into this very serious motorcycle accident. That was it. Any sports was over. Everything was over. In and out of hospital for 2 years.
2 years? What ended up happening?
I had a tibia, fibia, compound fractures, a bunch of other breakages, but I had gangrene. So they're actually going to amputate my leg at one stage. And I didn't have insurance. They brought me to the hospital. I mean, we're growing up in Europe. You hear these terrible stories. In America, they leave you on the side of the road. Well, I got brought to a hospital, and I'm all jacked up. They thought I'd broken my neck. It was a head-on motorcycle accident. And so never touched the brakes, split the helmet, the whole thing.
Wow.
So I get to the hospital and they go, sir, do you have insurance? And after they stabilized me, they put me back on the ambulance and took me over to UCSD Medical Center, which was and floor 7, ward 7, never forget it, 1986, October 30th. And it was where they were treating the local prisoners. Now they might have thought, hey, Irish guy, prisoners, they'll get along great, right? Similar family. So I went there and I had no insurance and nothing. And so it was a hard scrabble kind of deal. And Medi-Cal covered it. They gave me a chance until I eventually paid them off.
Wow.
But I eventually they put rods and screws. About 8 weeks afterwards, they did all that, but now I had to stay. So I actually didn't choose to live in America. America kind of chose me. Yeah. So now I'm 19 years of age. I don't know it at the time, but I've giant medical bills coming. To the point that literally the ambulance chasers, the first ambulance chaser I ever connected was the guy who actually were the ambulance companies. And here's your $18,000 bill. And this started. So I owed
how'd you handle it?
Well,
you owed $200,000?
$252,000 in 1986 as a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
And your dad's a house painter.
Yeah.
It was a grind. So I actually had a bicycle and I rode around town and I did paint jobs with my leg in a cast.
Wow.
I did that for about 6-7 months. And then one day I saw a sign in the window that says, we'll train realtors for free. And I go, great, that's about how much I have.
Well, before we get into realtors,
so
I want to get into real estate, which is great because that's what you're known for.
Yeah, right.
How did you keep the wolves away from the door? I'm really interested in that.
Well, it might have been my first objection.
Because I had a strategy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I had financial Armageddon happen to me around 2001 to 2003.
Oh, really?
Terrible. Like the worst. I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
Wow.
It was awful. Debts went crazy and income went away.
Yeah.
It was nuts. But I had a specific strategy of because the only way so I wasn't going to go crazy.
Right.
So I'm curious what yours was.
Well, I had a couple of things, which is I'd get these bills coming in the door.
Yeah.
Now I'm
They're
now,
calling, yelling at you.
Like I'm talking about at one stage I had 3 grapefruit in my refrigerator. That was my net worth.
Wow.
Okay. And they're calling me and they're like, and I'm a stranger in a strange land.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how this works.
Yeah. And
my phone is blowing up and you said you'd pay. And then they all went over to the bill collectors.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't know about personal injury attorneys or anything like that. I mean, I was
nothing. Yeah.
So the bills would come in and I would put them on a little mantelpiece and the new bill came in, I'd put it in the back. And when the bill fell off the front of the mantelpiece, I read it. Okay. So then I finally, and by the way, it was around that time, I met a guy in the hospital who gave me Jim Rohn's book. And I first started reading the Jim Rohn. And he was talking about your mind and the philosophy and whatever else. And I'm desperate. So I come up with this concept that I said, I'm broke one day a month. One day a month, I'm broke. The other 29 days of the month, I'm debt free, because I was so consumed by worry.
Yep.
I was so stressed out. I'd never owned anybody a thing in my life. And I'm being set upon. So I said, the day I have to pay the bill is the day I'm broke. And other than that, I'm not. And so I would call on the day I was broke, usually the end of the month, and I'd call them proactively and said, I don't have the money this month. I'm going to call you next month. And put it down on the calendar and I'll call you. And whatever I can give you, I can give you. And they were so shocked that I was calling them proactively. And I put it on, set the expectation. And sometimes it was like, I owed them 18 grand and I sent them $100. And I said, I'll call you on this date next month. And I lived, what I did was I didn't paralyze myself the 29 days I was broke. And I was depressed one day. I have a few Guinnesses because it was all day on the phone calling people I had no ability to repay.
Yep.
But it also set for me in that time that kind of resolve. So I also was 19, didn't know anything. So I really wasn't falling from something. Like you're in 2000, you probably had already achieved quite a bit.
I had a ton and it all went away.
Yeah, amazing. That's rough. So what was your system?
Very similar because you'll go crazy.
Yes.
And you'll feel bad all the time. I was literally traumatized by the mail. I couldn't look at it.
Yep.
Right. So, and to this day, I don't open.
Okay. Let me jump in on top of
I have my bookkeeper does it and then gives me a report after.
Well, let me give you this because you'll brother from a different mother here. You remember when we had landlines in our house?
Yeah. You didn't have a caller ID.
So here's the thing. My wife, 18 years into our marriage, we're 35 years married, great woman. About 18 years into our marriage, she says, Brian, do you know that since we've been married, you've never answered the phone? I go, what? She goes, Brian, if you're standing next to the phone, you won't answer the phone. I said, I've never noticed that. She goes, oh, the rest of us have. And so I know you know what I'm talking about.
100%.
I had no knowledge of that, but you talk about the mail.
Yeah. The mail and the phone, both.
Yeah.
Then they change colors, the mail.
Yeah.
It turns orange. It turns red.
Yeah,
it turns,
right.
It becomes certified. I mean, you get FedEx.
Then there's someone knocking at the door.
So I couldn't handle it. It was, you almost couldn't breathe. It was so tough.
Yeah.
So I went once a week. I had legal stuff. I had all kinds of different things, but I put everything in 3 hours every Monday, 3 hours. And I called everyone, every single person, and they screamed and hollered and screamed and hollered and screamed and hollered. You're a deadbeat. We're going to embarrass you in front of your friends, and we're going to drag your name up and down the road, and everybody's going to know that you're a piece of blah 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 blah. So yes, but I'm calling you,
right?
And I'm just telling you where I'm at, and I'll call you next week. And I literally called everybody. I dealt with all of the stuff, and then I put it away so I couldn't see it for the next week. And they screamed and hollered the week after. They screamed and hollered like the third week. But about the fourth week, they said, you don't have to call us next week. Just give us an update when something's happening. But we do appreciate the fact that you're calling. That you're letting us know, because nobody else does like yours.
Yeah.
You put yourself in a different pile.
For sure.
This is a person who's trying,
Yeah.
but literally doesn't have it.
Yeah.
Everybody else was running and they're going on vacations and stuff. I wasn't going on any vacations.
Right.
I wasn't spending any extra money. I was just trying to deal with it. And everybody in my life said, you file bankruptcy, bankruptcy.
Everyone.
File bankruptcy.
100%.
No.
Same as myself.
And I didn't.
Good for you.
I paid everybody.
Yep.
There's people that had written off the debt.
Yep.
Completely. Yep. And I still paid them. And they were like, no one has ever done this. But anyway, the coping mechanism I was interested in.
That's why you are where you are today, though, right? I mean, that's that.
I guess. I have learned to take struggles and put them in a smaller box.
Yeah.
Instead of let them consume you.
Right.
Because if I stayed with the struggle, I was never going to get out.
Right.
I had to have the other 140 hours a week focused on rebuilding.
Right.
And if I didn't do that, if I couldn't focus on that,
right.
There was nothing.
Well, I hated that feeling so much. I was willing to sacrifice whatever needed to be done
so you don't
to not have that feeling again.
Yeah. 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 For you hadn't really developed a big net worth or whatever. I was a person who had money.
Yeah. So you fell.
Yeah. I had $9 million or whatever in a portfolio and I'm making $1 million a year.
Boom.
And gone.
Yep.
All of it gone in like less than a year.
Right. And the other piece that people don't maybe.
So the ego gets involved.
Well, your identity, right? Because so you can find your identity in that stuff. So now, and by the way, I went through one then, another one a number of years later. I had one of those bangs. We all do.
You can develop blind spots, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or a little bit of hubris. Everything's working. Everything's working. Well, this next thing will work.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. And you don't pivot quick enough. And all of a sudden you're in a little bit of a bind.
Well, I love hearing the story because, our mentor, Jim, used to say, do you want to hear the story or the whole story? Remember he used to say that? And
right.
I was at a board meeting about a year ago. And there were some big bangers in this room, people who built giant billion-dollar companies and things like that. And there was a gentleman who'd been brought in, and he would just say nothing in the meetings. And so the gentleman who was he was the chairman emeritus, and I'm not going to tell you his name, but he has products we've all used. So he says to this one gentleman, you don't really say much in these meetings, and we really would like to hear from you. And your input is important. And he was kind of intimidated to talk, and he says, I don't know why I'm on this board. He said, I have recently had a business failure. And I got to be honest with you, I feel like a fraud sitting here amongst all you uber successful people. And everyone in the room starts laughing. And now his face starts getting red. He feels totally humiliated. Mm-hmm. And then the co-chairman of the board says, he goes, we've all been there. We've all done it. Maybe it's time for us to go around the room and tell just maybe one of our major failures. We don't have time for them all. And we went through this thing, and it was the most cathartic thing. About 3 months later, I bump into him, and he said, I think that board meeting saved my marriage. Because I thought I was the only one.
I was not.
I was the only one. And everyone else, right? The grass is always greener. Like Eric Worre, he got this and that and the whole thing. Never had a bad day in his life.
Yeah.
Never made a wrong turn. Never made a bad decision. Never had any doubt. Never had any fear. Butter wouldn't melt in your mouth. And so
I had all those things, but one thing helped me. You realize in those situations who your friends are, who's not, who runs away.
Yep.
Who calls and just says, hey, I want you to know I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to a guy who was in the country club, which my house was in foreclosure in.
Yep.
And he said, Eric, let me tell you something. People like you always come back.
Mm-hmm.
You can never count people like
Yep.
you. He said, like somebody like me, huh? Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Somebody like you. You're always going to find a way.
Yeah.
You're not going to be stopped. You're not going to be broken by this. You're just going to make it.
Yeah.
And you got to deal with these different, chirping birds who are.
I had an old military guy who came by my house who was no motivational guru of any sense of the capacity.
Those are the best.
I used to play golf with him, and he came by, and it was Christmas. This was after we'd had I've owned 47 businesses, and one of them failed. And that one failure haunted me. I'd say it haunted me for 6 years.
Wow.
And he came by one Christmas, and he's bringing little kids. I had 2 small kids at the time. And he brings by this basket and whatever else. And he just says to me going out the door, it's not how hard you fall, it's how high you bounce. Closed the door and walked out the door. Is the late Tom Kelly. And now those words stay with me for the rest of my life. And, that's the beauty. And I love, talking to you and, listening to your story as well. It's like people just have to find courage in that and encouragement in that. And the most magical thing is, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
And the other magical one is, I did it before, I can do it again.
Yeah.
Those two statements, I think, can transform any life.
Right. And figure out coping mechanisms while you're going through it.
Right.
Who are you listening to?
Yeah.
What are you allowing to get you down?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, man, you can't sleep during these times. It's really, it feels dark and lonely. And that's why you need to get into something proactive.
Yeah. The worst thing about this type of failure is the worst thing than losing your money is you lose your confidence.
Yeah.
And you question your ability to make good decisions.
Sure.
And when you get this next opportunity and that entrepreneurial fire goes and that ambition wants to fire and you're going, is this another one of these? Is this another one of these? But you learn your tendencies and you see, no, that's my pattern. How do I guard against that? Right. And then, okay, I'm going to slow down. It might be a bit more thorough this time. I might do a business plan that's real, whatever it is. But like I did do it before and I can do it again. That's why I think it takes 6 hours to put a bad deal together and 6 years to recover from it.
Yeah. Bad deals can show up really quick, or bad relationships in business can show up really quick. And what's funny for me is coming out of that situation, I tried to get it all in a couple of years of what I had lost. Yeah. So I was swinging for home runs. Right. And that was a mistake as well. So I had to let that go. Right. And start hitting singles.
Well, psychologically, that's right. It's called homeostasis. Homing pigeon wants to return home.
I was just like, this is not right. I got to get back to my 9 million. I got to get back to my $1 million a year.
I'm going to buy a house on the same street where I got it foreclosed.
Yes. I used to ask my friends, like, hey, do you have any ideas on how to make $1 million a year? And they laughed and laughed. And like, well, yeah, add 20 years to a good idea and work your butt off and don't get paid for a long time. Yeah. Oh, that's how you do it. I don't have that kind of time. So anyway, so the first venture immediately after that did not succeed. Second venture did. And then off we went.
Now here we are. And now you're the rock star and never had a bad day in your life.
Well,
right. That's what they think.
I like to use them. I do try and remind people of the bad days because, there's somebody listening to this right now that's going, wait a minute. These guys are both, top of their field, and they went through that. If I'm going through my stuff, maybe it's
what would you say you did learn? Like, what if you obviously took what you learned from that and built your current empire? What would be the biggest things?
I think you have to have urgency, but you have to have patience as well. Patience with urgency, right? So it's going to take a minute. So the other thing is, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Just stop digging, because we can be delusional and make the situation much, much, much worse. Some unfortunate thing happens in your business. If you don't quickly, almost overreact to reducing your lifestyle to get your expenses below your income, whatever that income is, then every day you're moving forward in this delusion, right? You're digging a deeper hole. Right. And so many people do that. They just keep like, well, no, this is difficult, but we have to have Christmas. Yeah. And we still need 2 cars and, we can't take the kids out of school. Yes, you can. Right. You got to get your financial footprint small. Right. So you have choices and options and you have flexibility. You don't have this huge monster that is chewing up all of your efforts and gobbling all of the revenue that you're bringing in.
It's the death of our idea. It's the ego, right? Yeah. A friend of Zig Ziglar used to say, ego is edging God out. Yeah. And you got to get humble. And I remember, so I had.
And do it fast. It's about speed. Yeah. How quickly can you do it? Right. Well, I'm going to lose money on this. So. Right. So how quickly can you do it? Right. I had a friend of mine that was about moving in Palisades. So he bought a house in Palisades. Okay. And then his wife didn't want to move in there. So he's like, oh. So he sold, she was terrified of fire. So she said, she was imagining she was going to get burned alive in her house. So he's like, oh, what are you talking about? I mean, this is crazy. So he ended up selling it for $800,000 loss.
Oh, wow.
And then 2 months later, it burned to the ground. So was it a blessing or was it a curse? Right. Which one? It's fun. You have to have your perspective on how you're looking at this stuff, right? So speed. If you have a terrible thing happen in your business, speed of reducing your financial footprint is probably the number one thing. Yeah, and then focus on your skills. Right. Focus what got you here. And then put in the reps.
It's your skills that pay the bills.
It is 100%. Yeah. People ask in my field, do you have any advice? My advice is just lean on the skills. Right. Because if you become highly skilled, if you can put your name to it, right?
Yes, sir. Then
you're gonna have more confidence. If you have more confidence, you're gonna take more action.
One of the things we're dealing right now, I have 6 kids, right? So I have this gamut of ages. So I'm around all their friends. And a number of them are disillusioned, right? The average age of first-time buyer right now is 38.
Really?
38. I mean, how old were you when you bought your first house?
Oh, but I don't know if we'd call it buying.
Yeah, right.
It was like, they put my name on a piece of paper, but I didn't ever feel like I owned for quite. Yeah, it was in my 30s.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I would say a lot of people, our age did it younger. And now every year is going on. And so they're getting further and further away. And think about it. Like, what did you have to, a house was 250 grand. You had to save 25 grand. And it was more money back then, but you ground and ground. Now you want to buy a house, depending on what city you're in, it could be 500 grand.
Bananas.
And I'm 26 years of age. So what's happening is, and we've seen all these studies where millennials are going, okay, I'm a little overwhelmed at the prospect of this. So now I'm going to swing for the fences. And so that's where the online betting has gone through the Richter scale.
More spent on online betting than in investing and saving.
100%.
In the United States
and
last
why?
year.
The answer is why? Because they're the speed issue.
The speed
say,
plus dopamine, yeah.
Right, yeah, right. It's the dopamine for sure. But it's going to be a grind. If you want this bad enough, you're going to have to sacrifice for it. Yeah, I feel like it's overwhelming. Now I'm going to put it all on black. I'm going to put it all on the Raiders. I'm going to put it all back on the hockey game. And what's happening is, as you and I know, the compounding cycles are where fortunes are made.
Yeah, and people don't understand that. I had this lesson taught to me when I was 23. I had 18 jobs before I was 23. I was just like a screw off. Did everything you can do minimum wage.
Yeah.
And I sat down with this guy. He was involved in real estate, and he had like 3 or 4 different businesses, very successful. And I said, I want to change my life. I'm sick of this. He said, can you get 0.3% better a day? I'm like, well, that's not that much, I suppose. Yeah. Can you do it every day? Yeah. Okay. If you do that, that's 100% year one. On you, 200%, 400%, 800%, 1,600%, 3,200%, 6,400%.
Yeah.
And 6,400% was like 7 years in. 7 years in, I made $1 million.
Right.
Because I was willing to do those little grindy things compounded.
Yeah.
Right. When other people weren't.
Yeah.
They were either trading time for money, or they wanted everything now.
Yeah.
Or they went down the road that Jim Rohn used to talk about. I want to do a little bit less, get paid a little bit more.
Right.
And the end of that road is do nothing and get everything.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's where half of our society is.
Right.
They want to do less and get a lot more.
Right.
So they'll go on strike for it, and they'll do all kinds of stuff for it. And,
I mean, Albert
Jim
Einstein
used to say you can't get rich by going on strike.
Right.
You have to go get it. You got to go earn it. But you're the asset. That's the other thing that I realized. You're the asset.
Right.
And if you develop you,
work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Exactly. You'll go from making a living to making a fortune.
Yeah. And there were all these rhymey things that were almost cliches, and people like tune them out, but they're real.
True.
They're real.
Made me a fortune.
Yeah.
Here we are. You and I are kind of disciples of Jim Rohn and many, many others that I've met.
Yeah.
And how many men and candidly, because Jim and I became friends, and he spoke at a bunch of my events, and then we did a bunch of stuff together.
Yeah.
And the amount of people, the wild thing is the amount of people he produced that went on to have far greater success than he ever enjoyed in his life.
And he didn't mind.
He didn't mind at all.
And he didn't mind if you quoted him without giving him credit.
Right.
He didn't mind any of that stuff. He didn't even focus on that stuff.
I always did. The last time Jim Rohn, I was the last person ever to have them on stage together. Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar. And we were at the Milk House in Disney World. I think I was 5,000 people, and we put a stage in the center, and they were the crowd was around us, and we had the two guys together. And before Jim passed, it was and I never forget it, because Zig's the motivation guy, and then Jim, and I loved them both. They were both like fathers to me, but Jim was really influenced me with my philosophy. And Zig's doing his whole motivational thing, and it was great. And then Jim turns on, I'll never forget this. He goes, Zig, motivation alone is not enough. If you take an idiot and you motivate him, now he's a motivated idiot.
Yep.
It's just the best.
The absolute best. Do you remember TPN?
Yeah.
That was my company.
No way.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Myself and my partner, we founded that company in '94, and Jim was the first person that
you were years ahead of.
We were ahead of our time.
You were.
Sure. We got lucky. We were able to sell the company to in '98 to '99 to another company. So that was my first real money I ever.
My sister worked for Bono, and she was Bono's masseuse. My sister's a great masseuse, and she traveled with U2 for years. And Bono has a phrase that was very powerful. He said, good ideas get better over time.
Yeah.
And you had a gregreat idea.
Yeah.
And over time, that idea is now alive and well in many capacities in streaming
what's interesting
services.
though? I've spent, I don't know if anybody spent more than me trying to popularize personal development. And the truth is, personal development is pretty small. It's a small space, but it's the glue of so many spaces.
Yeah.
It's the glue in the real estate business, personal development. It's the glue in network marketing space, personal development. So it's glue. It's really good glue.
Yeah.
But as a standalone by its own thing, it's not a tremendous business.
Yeah.
So
because everybody says they want it.
Yeah, no, people are not willing to be developed.
Right.
You know, it takes somebody hungry. Yeah. It takes somebody willing, takes somebody coachable. Yeah. And when that student's ready, the teacher shows up. Yeah.
Most people want to change their circumstances, but not themselves.
Exactly.
You know,
I'd like my situation to be different, please. Right. You have to be different.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm fanatical about it. I mean, my favorite subject in school was history. Yeah. And so coming to America as an immigrant and looking around and, you know, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And, you know, I started studying it all. And it was Rohn was my first introduction. But then I want to know, well, because he would quote people and I'd read what he quoted. And then I would, you know, he would quote Earl Nightingale. My studio is called the Nightingale Studio.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah.
And where's that? Is that
in Carlsbad in San Diego. Wow. So, yeah, I had his widow come out and christen the thing and whatever. So I'm really into this, right? And Zig and Jim and all those guys. But to me, it always goes back to Russell Conwell with the Acres of Diamonds. Acres of Diamonds.
This is the
wow.
This is the only known first edition of Acres of Diamonds, and it's a tattered mess, but but it's the only one that's known from Conwell.
Right, we might have a bidding war on this here. I might make you an offer you can't refuse. Come on.
Isn't that something?
It's always hard to buy anything from a guy with a plane.
Yeah, right?
But yeah, I mean, it started with him. But I will say this. So, I mean, I'm kind of a little OCD. I'm a systemizer by nature. Sure. And I went through the rise of American exceptionalism economically, along with the growth of the personal development movement. So, you know, Conwell, you know, as you know, maybe your folks know, maybe they don't. Right, here he comes. He gave his Acres of Diamonds speech over 6,200 times. He personally funded Temple University, built the first mega church in America. You know, and he was the guy that founded these principles that then led into that's where you know, How to Make Friends and Influence People with Dale Carnegie. That's where, you know,
Napoleon
Hill, right? And
Carnegie.
Think and Grow Rich. And each
or
one,
Carnegie.
Yeah, right.
Nobody says it right.
Right, yeah, right. That's because he was a Scot. You know, and he was, you know, brilliant people. And this whole genre, right, of people who changed. The Richest Man in Babylon. You know, George Clayson. So this different history.
I only read that because of Rohn.
Yeah, for sure. And they'd mention him. Yeah. And then the one regret I have in the pair, there's one guy, because I got, you know, I just so you know, for me, we're in the similar side of business. I do seminars, coaching, all this stuff. Yeah. I never needed to meet Jim Rohn. I listened to his tapes until they broke. I never needed to meet him. And then I got a chance to, when I built the seminar business, to have him come to the events. And then we struck this relationship, and it was just beyond, you know, and then Zig and all these people. But the one guy, the greatest salesman in the world with Og Mandino, and I had a chance, and this is whatever, maybe this is the lesson of today's interview. I had a chance to go hear Og Mandino live in 1992, and I said these words. I have very few regrets in my life, but I said out loud to my wife, I'll catch him next year. And I have read and listened to that man and the power of him. And his YouTube clips, where they might have 50,000 views, I might be 40,000 of them.
I know.
And they'll have, you know, some cat on a surfboard will have 100 million views on YouTube. But the wisdom that, you know, the people who absolutely changed your life, and that from that day on, when he passed away, I said, from that day on, anytime I have that sense, I want to go see that guy or I want to go do it, I do it.
Yep.
And that was in 1992, and today is 2025. And that lesson of missing Og Mandino in person, I've never missed anything since.
Yep.
I've gone to see Messi. I've gone to see Gretzky. When there's I've gone to see Michael Jordan. I've you know, when somebody's great, when someone has, I go.
Let me tell you a story about Og.
Okay.
Because of the TPN experience, it was all personal development.
Yeah.
Right? So we invited him to come speak, and we're going to film, create some content with him, which we did. And this is the last talk he did before he died. He did his talk, and he sat outside and signed autographs and took pictures for 7 hours when he was done. Every single person just sat. I'm like, "Are you okay, Og?" "I'm fine." And everybody just patiently waited. They had their 7 hours to be able to come up and say, "Thank you. You changed my life.
Wow.
You did this, you did that." And I was mad at him because you know how he died?
No.
He fell off his roof cleaning out leaves out of his
Oh,
gutter.
you know what? I did hear that in Arizona, right?
Like, Og,
Yeah.
pay some kid. At some point, you don't need to clean out the leaves out of your own gutter.
Yeah.
It's like, I even talked to my parents who are still in good health. Don't put yourself in a situation where you can fall.
Wow.
They're both in their 80s.
Yeah.
Just don't, because falling is the worst after a certain age.
You think about him, right? He flew with Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
He had PTSD, lost a marriage and a relationship with his child.
Yeah.
Became an alcoholic, getting ready to commit suicide. He hears the Hallelujah chorus on a Christmas Eve. I mean, it was that actually later on, that scene in Shawshank Redemption where Morgan Freeman's looking in the window and it's the gun is there. That came from Og Mandino, because Og Mandino was from Natick in Massachusetts, which is where Stephen King is from. So Stephen King, who wrote Shawshank Redemption, is from that's his hometown hero.
My favorite author.
Yeah. So he put that scene in of him looking in the window, and he buys the compass instead of the gun. Well, Og ends up, he's $10 in his pocket, going to go kill himself, and he doesn't. He goes to the church and hears the Hallelujah chorus, and then gets back to his mom saying, "You're going to be a great writer one day." Right? Starts off and does his whole thing, and becomes the editor of Success Magazine, writing the book at night. The numbers are this: in the second half of the 20th century, the only book that sold more than the greatest salesman in the world was the Bible.
Really? I didn't know that.
He was that prolific. And so that's the beauty, like having a chat like this, and this has been great for me. I don't know if anybody's getting that notice, but
come on.
I'm glad I came.
Our group is connected to this.
But I would say this, no matter where the heck you are, I mean, there's a fella who was at the very bottom of everything.
Yeah.
And became this massively influential human being.
Yeah.
Jim Rohn, the influence he's had on you and I. You and I are connected like day one because we've had our lives shaped by similar people.
Yeah. The greatest salesman in the world. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. The scrolls in that book, he wrote in one night. One night. His wife gave him a little tweak the next morning after she read them. Right. And he's like, you know what? I'm missing. He added a scroll to it after that. But one night and then created the story after that. Those still to this day are my favorite books, are philosophical novels that tell a story. Like The Wealthy Barber, The Greatest Salesman, or The Alchemist.
The Alchemist, yeah.
Things like that.
The Alchemist, when he published that book, it sold less than 1,000 copies.
Long tail.
And then bang, people start rediscovering it. Hollywood rediscovered it. Millions and millions and millions of copies.
I wish I could write fiction because those are the most interesting.
Sure.
But
that's all right. We do
I
what
don't know
we
if
do.
it's a limiting belief, but I can't. I don't know how to do that.
You know what? Ballers want to be rappers and rappers want to be ballers. I've written books that have sold well, but I go, as a writer, I'm a great speaker.
Right. Yeah, right. Well, let's pivot into what you're great at.
Okay.
In addition to the personal development, because I'm sure it infuses everything that you do. You find your way into real estate, which, when I ask around, you start seeing trends, right? In wealthier circles. It's one of like three things: insurance, real estate, or they picked some common thing and became great at it. There's a huge mansion next to my house where I grew up, and the guy made wire hangers. That's all he made.
Yeah.
I've got a neighbor friend of mine here his family has a huge farm. He's worth $100 million, but it's farming.
Yep.
They picked something.
Get good at it.
They make tissues. They make
the guy
bottles.
who invented WD-40. If you ever been to Coronado Island,
Yeah.
The biggest, most magnificent mansion on the ocean in
It's the
Coronado Island is the guy who
WD-40.
went. And you know what?
Yeah.
That company has only ever had one product in
Right.
its history.
Right.
Focus, focus, focus.
Yeah.